We don't do any criminal investigation, and when there is not a criminal investigation, I can do anything.
But given your extraordinary credibility and the fact that you are a man who has made a difference in meting out justice in Holland,
Yes.
didn't that add to, the imperative that they do something? I mean, you were presenting something. You set out to disprove. You didn't think it was real. Then you came to. It seems to me that
I pressed him. I said, "I've got all the information for you. I can travel with you to Turkey. We can speak to the victims, to the police officers, intelligence officers." And he said, "No, I'm not allowed to do that.
Not allowed.
Not allowed."
Under pain of being fired or reprimanded in some way, do you think? Or
I don't know.
You don't know. Okay. Okay. I'd like to yield to, without objection, to one of our counsels on the Helsinki Commission, Alison Hobaugh. Alison.
Thank you all for being here today. Mr. Langendoen, what is the current status of the Babasin case? You did extensive research into evidence tampering with the wiretaps. Has there been any movement in the Dutch government on looking into this case any further to see if there was any miscarriage of justice?
Maybe I will, because there happened something in that case now. Till now, they refused completely to do anything. We asked again and again for investigating because the man was convicted on only telephone tapes. And Mr. Langendoen even interviewed in Turkey also a policeman who said, "I was helping the Dutch to manipulate those telephone tapes at the time." But they refused till now to do an investigation, but we made a revision request to the Supreme Court of the conviction of Mr. Babasin, and that revision request was done April 2011. And only recently, and we brought in all the evidence we have, and we have a lot, and recently in August 2011, the Attorney General of the Supreme Court said, I require to the Supreme Court that I can do a new investigation into this case because there is so much material, but we want to verify that material. And just recently, the day we left for Washington, that was Monday or Tuesday, I got information from the Supreme Court that they made a quick decision. It was planned on 30th of October, but they made it last Tuesday, and they said the prosecutor the Attorney General of the Supreme Court, by the new law, can do this investigation itself. So I think now that the Attorney General, different than the prosecution office, sees the value of what we have already, and he is now starting an investigation. And we just can hope that this will be a real investigation. He wrote in his conclusion very precisely that he wants to involve the defense very much into this investigation because also he believes in rule of law. But he said, I almost can't believe that this happened in my country, but let's go and investigate it. So this is a new development, but very recent. Actually, last week before we left, yeah. Yeah.
Now, will this be a full investigation or a fact-finding investigation or a completely different type? Because
it is a very special investigation in our criminal law. It is and it is just by new law, 1st of October, made possible. And it is a fact-finding investigation by the highest Attorney General of the Supreme Court into the facts. We brought new facts for the revision. So that will be the telephone tapes, but that will also be the interrogation of a translator who knew everything and who said that this Babasin was a purpose of the Turkish government. So he's going to interview witnesses and he wants to make a new investigation on the telephone tapes and all the irregularities which you can hear already, but then to investigate it really. So it can take some time, but it will be very interesting. And of course, then you can't walk along Mr. Demming's role anymore either. Yeah.
Ms. Vardaman, you mentioned in your statement that legalized prostitution led to increased demand and thus a need for greater supply. in relation to the Netherlands' legalization of prostitution in the year 2000. You also did a study of several other countries at the same time in your 2007 study. Did you also see a similar pattern there, if any of them similarly legalized, or do you have any other examples of legalization leading to greater demand?
The other three countries, Japan, Jamaica, and the United States, do not have legalized prostitution and did not at that time, except for the rare situation in the state of Nevada where several counties still have brothels, legal brothels. And that was really the only thing we could compare to in that research. However, it did play out similarly in our research in Nevada. Las Vegas was one of the cities we focused on, and that definitely was a line of questioning that we had when we went into Las Vegas. And the similar feeling and evidence came out that there was an increase in demand for commercial sexual activity in those places where it is legal. And that included those counties in Nevada where they saw actually people leaving the city of Las Vegas to travel out to the nearest county that does have legalized prostitution for that purpose.
Before we conclude, and I would ask if there's anything else you would like to share with us, I do want to mention that we did invite Ambassador at Large for Human Trafficking, Lucy DeBaca, to be here today. I have called over to the office, as has the staff, several times, specifically on this case, and I have not heard back from them, which is disappointing, because I wrote the law that created that position, both the office and the Ambassador at Large, and no callback. You know, again, whether a country be a great friend in the United States or something less than that, friends don't let friends commit human rights abuses, and if this is an aberration or if this is a pattern, there are real victims, including the very courageous Mr. B, who's right over here, who have suffered and carry those scars, and we need to speak truth to power wherever it is, including our own country here in the United States. So I note that with disappointment that they're not here to be at this table to speak to this very important issue. But we will stay at that. We do, since this is a briefing and not a formal hearing, we do entertain questions. So if there is anyone who would like to raise a question with our very distinguished witnesses, or me, please proceed. Yes. Would you take a...
You want to take the microphone at the end of the dais there?
Hello. Hi, my name is Kwame Fosu, and I'm the Policy Director for the Rebecca Project for Human Rights. And thank you for holding this very important hearing. We are very grateful, and thank you for coming, Adèle, Klaas, and B. What is the process? We know that the Netherlands has been cited by the United Nations as one of the top 10 tourist destinations, one of the top 10 destinations for sex tourism. What is the process of changing their rating from a tier 1 country to a tier 2 or tier 3? What is the actual process? How do we do this? Because it's very important to the Rebecca Project that people like yours, Demick, who actually are in charge of prosecuting human trafficking, do come to justice. And we want to make sure that advocates in the United States are aware of this and know how we can take steps to change the rating. And so we want to know what's
Great question. First of all, as I think many of you know, we established what we called minimum standards in the 2000 Act. We built on those in the 03, the 05, and then the more recent Act, adding to information as to what the backdrop is that we use in our data calls to our embassies in finding out whether or not there are prosecutions, complicity by government officials, how well or poorly the military is doing, are they complicit in trafficking, and it's a very comprehensive look. And matter of fact, in 2000, we were focusing on arrests, but we didn't get to the conviction part, and some countries actually gamed the system and did arrest, but they weren't doing anything about jail time. So we changed that in subsequent laws. The process, very simply, after that backdrop, looking at the facts, then applying what's happening on the ground with those standards, the minimum standards as we call them, and they are minimum. They're not maximum, they're minimum, but they're very important, is for the Department of State to make a call based on that information as to whether or not they are Tier 1, Tier 2, watch list, or egregious violators, which would be Tier 3. The process today, the designation of any country can be changed on any day if the data warrants it. It is customarily done after the TIP report is released. There's a section that has all countries ranked, including the United States. But frankly, if information comes forward suggesting that there is reason for a demotion or a change, an improvement, a tier ranking can be changed on any day of the week of any month of the year. So Holland could be changed if the Department of State and the TIP office so desired it today or tomorrow or any other day. But we did, by design, as Congress, did not make tier callings. We felt that it would be best done by each of our embassies feeding into the TIP office itself. And as we all know, there is a political struggle within the Department of State. There are many ambassadors who don't want their country being designated Tier 3. There's a great deal of pushback. I think that's unfortunate. It ought to be all about the Mr. Bs and the victims, because there is a two-part strategy there. First, the designation, and then what do you do with it? There are a number of actions that can be taken in terms of penalties, and hopefully the penalties will be commensurate with the tier rating. But if a country does start to make some real progress, and we've had a number of countries that have done that. Great allies like Israel and South Korea were Tier 3 countries. And Israel moved heaven and earth to close brothels and to make sure that women, especially in Tel Aviv, were not being exploited. And in like manner, South Korea passed a number of important laws and policies to mitigate trafficking, particularly sex trafficking, in that country. So, it's all about making the call based on the facts. I have argued for a long time that Holland does not deserve to be on Tier 1 because of the enormously large number of women and boys and young people who are exploited in the 13, as Ms. Vardaman told us, red light districts in that country. And the line of demarcation between a trafficking victim and a woman who purports to be there on her own volition is very threadbare indeed. There are levels of force, fraud, and coercion that could be easily missed by someone who is inclined to think it's all okay. And added to that, anyone who has not attained the age of 18. So all of these young boys that are being exploited, and young girls, in Amsterdam, and the facility that is still, or the brothel that still has people in it with a different name, is a trafficking crime. Because, one commercial sex act, our definition in the law, and anyone who has not attained the age of 18 is by definition a sex trafficking victim. So I would encourage, even admonish the administration to rethink its Tier 1 designation, but I've done that before and have gotten nowhere. Thank you for the question. Yes, please.
Dr. Cassie Bevan. I used to work in this committee, and for you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to know, given the fact that we don't really have jurisdiction over Holland, and there is no real nexus for us to be able to make much change in another country, how do we enforce, one, how would we keep the Secretary General or anyone else who's an offender out of the United States? And what kind of resolution, what kind of enforcement could we in the United States have as a Congress to be able to keep someone out? And the other is to how can we get Holland and other countries that have voluntarily entered into agreements, such as the Palermo protocols. Why is not, how do you get countries to follow their own agreements that they agreed to enforce in their own countries. I mean, everybody is saying, you know, your three Ps, your protect, prevent, and prosecute. But, you know, we're not seeing it. And I think it's outrageous that the tip office doesn't respond to the chairman of a committee like this and the author of the bill, who is much esteemed by everyone in this room and in every place. So that's outrageous.
Thank you. Cassie, is that for me or the others or all of us? Well, I'll just take a couple. Okay, yeah, please. Plas?
To understand well, you say you can have nice regulations, but when something is behind it, like hidden, that even policemen are forced to silence down. That's the point. I think it's very important that that the facts we bring now are included in the conversations, in the estimations, and that's the only thing to do, because you can make rules, but that's what I say. I'm educated in a country where, rule of law and so on, but when you see then the reality and the practice, that can really frustrate. And it's very important, like you as a chairman already said, we have to listen to the victims, but it's also very important in a country like the Netherlands and that's what I saw those last years very clearly, that people working as policemen, really honest policemen, even honest prosecutors, I have them seen in my office, sometimes with tears in their eyes, that they could not go on. They were scared. Some lost their jobs because they didn't want to go on. It's very important that we find a way to support the good people in those systems who want to do something. And when policemen are forced to close their mouths, that we find a way to support them, to help them. And that's a very difficult thing, because what you see is that people shut their mouths and say, okay, Mrs. van der Plas, I know much more, but I'm not going to tell you till I'm retired, because I'm still scared for my profession, for my little house. I have children. This is, at the moment, a mentality in the Netherlands, and that was shocking me. And I think people have to come out, and the people who come out has to be supported. You have to say, okay, when you deny it, here are facts, and what are your facts? So that's why we come here, because there was a bit of discrepancy between that she says, yes, but the Netherlands are doing a lot of effort in new laws and things like that. I don't deny that. I just say what's happening behind the screens that makes, it's like you paint your ceiling white, but the roof still has holes and the water pours in. That's the whole problem. And how do we find a solution for that?
I would add that there's no statute of limitations on rape and exploitation of young children. As I said in my opening, I can't think of a more egregious crime against a human being than rape, and then rape of a child. And we know with the victims that the scars are lifelong, can perhaps never be mitigated, but we need to stand with them, that there's justice for those who commit these crimes. The importance of a hearing like this is to try to bring light and scrutiny, to try to persuade the Dutch government, who is a close ally of the United States, that this is an embarrassment. And if we're wrong, if this information is not correct, if this is some grand conspiracy, the purpose of which I can't even begin to think why. I mean, before we decided to do this, we did our due diligence on our side. And that doesn't mean we have absolutely everything, but that's why we have asked for an investigation that will go on beyond the cursory. And to have a man of Klaus's status, I should say, a man who made it his business to put criminals away for life, that have committed terrible crimes, brings an enormous amount of credibility, as do you all, and to hear from the victims themselves is numbing. In terms of what we should do, our own tip office should be here. It's not. I will ask again that they engage on this. Maybe they have, and I'd love to see the information. I wanted it before we actually had this briefing. Our appeal is to the government, and I hope that they will respond, and it would indicate, if the Attorney General takes this up, that, you know, for their own reasons, because they care about justice. You care about, Holland is a rule of law country. And again, with regards to tiers, as I said before, we did not mince designating our best friends in the world who are at risk. South Korea with the threat in the north. Israel, who is our greatest ally in the Middle East, the only democracy in the Middle East, was on Tier 3 during the Bush administration. And I always applauded that courage to do that. And I would note parenthetically that this bill, and Cassie remembers this because she worked with us to help get it enacted in the first place, was vigorously opposed by the Clinton administration. On the record, Harold Koh sat where you sat, who's now Consular of State. They did not want to have the naming of names, because it is embarrassing, it complicates all the niceties of statecraft, and they did not want sanctions. My argument is everyone will agree if it's all done in the abstract to combating trafficking, not so when you really do the data calls, you do the hard work and say there are people, victims like, you know, like Mr. B, who, that's why we do this law, period. And so naming is important, and I hope the TIP office takes a good look at this and reviews this. Finally, I am the special representative for the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly. I do think it is my job in that capacity to raise these issues in the hope that very well-meaning and people committed to the rule of law, which we know the Dutch government has, as you pointed out, Ms. van der Plas, there are these great policemen who are frustrated.
Really?
Just do it right, you know, and we're trying to form some support for that. Anybody else? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm HP Schijnemachers. I'm Counselor for Justice and Home Affairs at the Netherlands Embassy. Just for the record, I wanted to make one comment, please, if you allow me. And that is that, contrary to the impression that the panel might have given you, the Netherlands takes the fight against child sex trafficking very seriously. And we could have commented if we would have been invited to this panel, but it wasn't until we protested not being included on this one-sided panel that you came back last Monday offering us the opportunity to ask the first question and send in a written statement. Well, since just asking a question or giving a short remark like this one doesn't compensate for the one-sidedness, we declined to do so. We did, however, send in the letters that the Minister of Security and Justice has sent to the Dutch Parliament, and I would refer to them. Thank you.
Can I ask you, please, if you don't mind, was there anything you heard today that caused you to rethink that perhaps there is a very credible story here?
I think that I'm not on the panel, so that's not the way to address questions to me. But
it's a give and take. This is not a hearing, and you have the floor, and I'm asking you a very serious question.
And I was in the process of giving you an answer, but I wanted to make that clear first. And that is that the information that has been given today has all been available, and therefore I think it's good that Mrs. van der Plas indicated that she's going to take this, what is now amounting to a public trial, to the Court of Appeals, and I think that's where it belongs. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Anything you'd like to say in sum before we close down?
I would like to thank you very much and your commission. I have a copy of what I said, but we all gave it already, but with the attachment. So it's one copy with this AC report and the letter of Mrs. Selby for your records. And thank you so much for what you do in general. For the Anti-Human Trafficking Act 2001, I was reading it from internet. I could follow everything. It's a very good, tremendous job. And I even also heard Mr. Obama speaking when there was here the United Nations conference that this is a new form of slavery. And thank you very much for this effort, this emphasis you made on this already for so many years, and hearing us here, and that we could bring here the problem we are fighting for so many years already.
Thank you so very much. And I will say that if the Dutch government would like to, we will convene a second hearing and invite you to the witness table. We'll work out a date, and I look forward to it. Hearing's adjourned.
Would be marvelous. Yeah. You did a great job. Thank you.